Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of the Godless Moms podcast on YouTube and Facebook. This week we are, I don't know if you joined us last week, but if you didn't join us last week, this is Janice, my co-host, and Janice is a counselor and she's an ex-believer, and she went through some things when she left her religion, and so she has a lot of intelligence and a lot of advice and a lot of experience that she likes to share with people, and she wants to help people with getting rid of or getting out of their religion. And you do that by counseling and through your workshops on divorcing religion.com,
That's
which
exactly
you guys
right.
should totally check it out. And I, of course, am Godless Mom, or Courtney Hurd, and I've been here for a millennia, and I'm really old, and if you don't know me, I don't really know why you're here, but yeah, I blog, and I'm a lifer atheist. And our podcast is about, for the most part, it's about parenting without religion, secular parenting. And we're here to answer your questions. If you have questions about parenting your kids without religion or anything else at all, we're totally fine with that. It doesn't have to fit neatly into secular parenting. We are good with anything. And you can, there's information down below in the description of how you can submit a question that is like the main topic of our next episode. But today we have a specific topic that we're going to be talking about because somebody reached out to you, Janice. And do you want to tell them what it is?
I do. Hi, everybody. I'm glad you can join us today. I had a question actually I received from somebody on Twitter, and they said, I come from a very religious home, and now I'm an atheist. I'd love to hear from you about how you handle family members trying to proselytize your kids. I've only had one situation thus far, but I know more are coming as they get older. Thanks so much. I'm excited about your podcast. Well, thank you so much for your question. And that really is a very big deal for people. But so I was raised in religion and then was married to a pastor for a time and have two children. And for a lot of the time that I was raising them, I also was very religious. But then there came a time where I was not religious anymore, and I still had my kids. They were still living with me, and one of my relatives, especially, very, very pushy when it comes to religion, and it was awkward because he's my dad, and that's where I find people really run into a lot of trouble. So if you don't need your additional family for anything, like you're not beholden to your parents for help with rent or childcare, then it's just a lot easier. You can set those boundaries and say, no, we're not going to talk about this. I don't want you talking about this with my kids. If you do talk with them about it, our relationship is over. Like, you can make those really firm boundaries. But for a lot of folks, we depend on that additional help that we might get from grandma and grandpa, and from aunties and uncles. And not only that, we don't like the thought of terminating that relationship with them. So in those situations, it becomes a lot trickier, and it's a lot more individual depending on your situation, how you are going to try and protect your child from these relatives that want to proselytize. What did you do, Courtney? Did you ever have either relatives or friends or just people in the community reaching out and trying to engage your kids in religion?
No, I've never, ever experienced that. But what I have experienced is, I think I mentioned this briefly in the last episode, but I have a differing outlook on medicine than my mom. And I just want to preface this by saying I love my mom to death, and she's a really smart person. We see these things differently. I come at it from a scientific perspective, and she comes at it from another one. So I've had to talk to her on numerous occasions about using some of her remedies on my son.
Like
And
a string of garlic around his neck?
Yeah. She's not as bad as some other like alternative medicine people.
Okay.
Like she's not as pushy. I try not to look at what she does personally in her life because it just makes me worry for her and it makes me upset. So I just kind of mind my own business when it comes to that. But when it comes to my kid, like I have to set boundaries, and I've had to set boundaries before with regards to like the alternative remedies that she uses sometimes. So I kind of know what it's like, but I know that it's completely different because this isn't like a whole worldview that I grew up with. This is something that my mom kind of developed after she retired, and like growing up, I was at doctors all the time. I was vaccinated. We were a scientific household, and this was just something that kind of bloomed a little bit after she retired. So it's a little bit different, but I do understand the need sometimes to have to set those boundaries and how difficult it can be to do that with somebody that you love so much and that you care about so much and that you can't think of losing. Like you don't want that person out of your life in any way, shape, or form. It's devastating to think about that. So I can totally appreciate how difficult that situation is for sure.
Yes, and depending on the age of the child or children that are involved, different things will be required of us. So I mean, if you're leaving your infant with grandma because you have to go back to work, she's likely going to be singing them, Jesus loves me and this sort of thing. Pardon me, but their own ability to take in information, obviously, it's somewhat limited when you're an infant. So we're not at that much of a concern then. But as the children progress into toddler and preschool age, this is a time when grandma or grandpa, or whoever the caregiver is that's religious, they might really start with Bible stories and buy them a children's Bible and this sort of thing. So I think it pays for us to be honest with this religious person. So we're not trying to hide anything. We're saying that's not what I believe, and I do not plan on raising my children that way. So we can respectfully ask them to avoid those topics. But again, if we are dependent on their health, and if they are deeply religious, it's almost like they cannot help themselves because they truly believe there is a hell and you're going there and your child is going there unless they can reach out and save this child. So as the child is old enough that they enjoy stories, that's how we can approach it with them. So we tell lots of stories, we read lots of stories, and we can talk about religion or the ideas that grandma or whoever else it is might be introducing as a story. Look at there are a whole bunch of different creation stories from our First Nations people and from groups all around the world that lived long before us. Everybody has their story about how things come to be. So we can be exposing our children to that and telling them, when grandma talks to you about Jesus or whatever the thing is, grandma's telling you her favorite story. And so that's one way that you can introduce the idea. And of course, we really also want to be encouraging critical thinking in our children. Now, for someone like me who grew up in a very religious home, I have to say critical thinking was not high on the list. Indoctrination was first and foremost. But we can be asking our children very open-ended questions. And we can, if we walk into a room and say, a vase has been smashed and it's on the floor, we can make a game of it. What do you think happened in here? What do you think happened? And then they tell you what they think happened, and you can say, well, why do you think that? Like, what's the evidence? And so you're exploring that whole concept of hypotheses and evidence, and really encouraging their curiosity and their creativity, fostering debate as your children get older. And always, this is coming from a place of love in your home. You always want your children to feel safe and welcome. And you also want them, because it's in their best interest, to learn critical thinking skills. So fostering debates and teaching them about reason, that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's actually one of my most viral blog posts ever on my blog was, I think it was 11 ways to teach your kids critical thinking. And it's super popular. And it's, there's a lot of those things in there where you're like, you start to teach your kids how to look for the evidence by asking them for the evidence of things that they believe or things that they're telling you. If they come home and they're like, oh, George told me that his mom is a painter or something like that. You can follow that up with questions, without being like accusatory of them lying, because there's a fine line there, right? Like,
right.
But you can ask, how do you know that? How do you believe this person? Stuff like that. And I remember there was one time that when we first moved to this small town, we decided to move to this town because of a private school that was here. It was a Montessori school. And I know that sounds super bougie, but it was a nonprofit. It was super cheap to send him there. It's not at all.
Nice.
But it was a good school. And we came here and we toured it. And I asked on the tour, I said, is there any ties to religion in this school? And she assured me that it was totally secular. So we moved here, despite the fact that my husband got a job in another town. We moved to this town for that school. And it was, I don't know, maybe a few months into his schooling there, he came home and he told me that his teacher was telling him that Jesus made the first food bank. And I know
it's loaves and fishes. That's what he stocked it with.
You want to know something, though, is that's not even the craziest thing that this school tried to teach my son, but that's a whole other episode. He came home and he's like, oh, did you know that Jesus invented food banks and like he started the first food bank and all this stuff? And yeah, I'm just like, and then that's where we had our first real big conversation about, how do you know? Your teacher, Miss S, told you this, but how do you know that she's telling the truth? And he would say stuff like, well, she's my teacher, and I'm like, yeah, but you can question authority and you can question what people tell you. And we've taught him that, and now nothing gets past him. Like, I would say more stuff gets past me than gets past my son. Yeah, he is super, super critical thinker. Like, he's a big critical thinker. And I just want to say, hi, Neil. Neil, I am new to this. Okay. So you're going to have to, maybe you could be my mentor and teach me all about making people a moderator. Because I don't know how to do that. But I promise you, when I figure all this stuff out, you will be a moderator. Anyways, yeah, so that's one of the things that we do at home, is we ask a lot of questions. And something else that we do is we promote shows, like, because at the time he used to love watching Netflix all the time, and he would get up really early on Saturday morning and go and watch like stuff on Netflix. And I wanted to make sure that he was watching stuff that was promoting critical thought and was science and evidence based, because there's some stuff out there that's not so much. And we found, like, Paw Patrol, if you actually sit down and actually listen to it, and Rescue Bots, Paw Patrol and Rescue Bots are science-based, really great science-based programs. I think it was Paw Patrol. And then there's also getting him to watch other things was difficult. And we figured out that if we just put it on, instead of suggesting he watch it, just put it on. And he'd come and he'd be like, "What's this?" And he'd sit down and he'd watch it. And we did that with Cosmos, and it got to the point where he would get up on Saturday morning and we would find him watching Cosmos by himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So would you watch some of those shows with him? And so that he could ask you questions, or you would ask him questions while the show is going on?
Yeah.
Because I like what you were saying about, so when we are asking our kids questions, we're not like grilling them. It's not some interrogation. Whenever we're communicating with people, we want there to be a warmth and a curiosity about how we are engaging and asking questions. That's how you get people to open up and to want to communicate. And that's what makes people feel safe with you. So that's the attitude that we want to take in when we're also encouraging our children to ask deeper questions.
Yeah. I think it helps to kind of make it fun and make it a game, which we used to do with Joey. Like it got to the point where we would say, "How do you know?" And that's kind of like something that we repeat, and it's kind of become a mantra a little bit. Like, "How do you know that? How do you know that?" Not so much anymore, because it's just not something that we need to worry about anymore. Like I said, he's really good at critical thinking at this point. I do not worry about him ever. Like he does not believe in anything. He doesn't believe in anything. Like nothing. Nothing he can't prove anyway. But that's definitely, you have to make it something that's enjoyable for a child.
Yes, age appropriate.
Yeah, and you can't, something else that I talked about too, I think in that blog post, was the fact that if you just push and push and push, even if it's science, like you can do the same thing with science that you can do with religion. You can push it to the point where he rejects it, right? You have to be careful. You can't just push and push and push. You've got to just know where the boundaries are, and you got to make sure that you're keeping things fun. Something else that we did was we got him the subscription to the Kiwi Crate, the Tinker boxes and stuff like that. That I found that he likes to take things apart and figure out how they work and stuff like that. So that fit right into that for him. And I mean, I know that he would make an amazing engineer, whether or not he wants to. But that's another way that we did promote critical thought as well in our house.
One website that I found helpful is called parentingscience.com. And they have ideas for introducing critical thinking to your little ones. I mean, really little, like preschool, and then up to the higher ages and grades as well. And so go online with your questions, looking for help, because what we want to do is get the kids to the point, like you were saying, Courtney, where their first response when someone tells them something is that they're thinking, even if they don't say it, they're thinking inwardly, well, how do you know that that's actually true? And, as it's okay if they're 4 or 5 years old or 6 years old and grandma's telling them then about Jesus, and the child says, how do you know that, grandma?
Yeah.
then grandma has to maybe stop and think about it. But these are just, ideas to try and religion-proof your child, or at least get them and not just religion, like any idea that's extremist or fundamentalist. We want people really to stop and examine whether there's merit to those ideas or not.
Yeah, and it's someone years ago explained it to me as inoculating your kids against
yes, I love
religion and indoctrination.
that.
And I think that the point that you brought up about teaching them about other people's beliefs, like all the different ones, I think that's probably the number one way to inoculate your kids against indoctrination, because if they know, like, so there's somebody in the chat right now, Taylor, and I don't know, is it a she? They are posting about Jesus and talking about their religious belief, and one of the things that they said was, how many prophecies have to be filled for you to believe? And the thing is that every religion claims prophecies have been fulfilled. There's every belief system on the planet claims that prophecies have been fulfilled. And they can't, like, you, if you actually examine those prophecies that have been fulfilled, it's a stretch. It's a real stretch. So if kids understand that, if kids understand that every religion claims that their prophecies have been fulfilled, they're less likely to believe any one singular one. But going along with this whole issue with Taylor, I want this to be a space where people feel good about chatting in the chat. And so I'd like to hear from you guys if you want her to go, because she's pushing her religion here. And if you guys don't want that, I'll kick her out. So let me know in the chat. Anyways, I also, hold on, let me just grab this. This is a book by David McAfee, and he sent it to me years ago to read, and it's awesome. It's definitely not for like little kids. It's for a little bit older kids, and it's about all the different beliefs that people believe in all over the world. So it's a good way to get that conversation going with your kids to read. And it's got these beautiful illustrations in them. So it's fun. And
I love that idea. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's short, it's accessible, and I definitely recommend picking it up.
I mean, also when we have someone that we love in our life and they are very much entrenched in religion, and we are liberated from religion, we don't believe that anymore, or we never did believe it, we also want to be modeling for our children that it's possible for us to maintain a loving relationship with this person. Like we're allowed to disagree even on some pretty big topics, and we can still care about each other, and we can still have respectful conversation with each other. Now, sometimes if the person is toxic, you might have to set a very firm boundary. Your first obligation is to protect your child. So you need to act on what you think has to be done to protect your child. But there are different ways to do it. I also want to mention, so yes, I am a registered professional counselor. Anything that you hear us talking about on this show, however, is not to take the place of meeting with your own therapist. So thanks. Got to get that little disclaimer out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
I see think Diana says they love the belief book. So there are other people out there that also are real fans of that book.
Yeah, I've posted about it a few times, and I reviewed it for him when he sent it to me. I think it's just genius. I think there should be like a whole series of books, like for even younger kids, for toddlers, where it's just like, one of those picture books that they can flip through about different gods. And
yes, because there are picture books, Bible for toddlers. My kids had them. So by the time my kids were 6, they certainly knew all the main stories of events, according to the Bible. So yeah, we definitely want to have ones about other religions and what they say as well.
Yeah. And I agree about the whole, if the person is toxic, because I've had people reach out to me before and tell me that they have someone in their family who's pushing it on their kids, and their kids would come home from their house and tell their mom that they're going to hell, and their kids would be terrified.
Mhm.
And when it gets to that point where your kid is terrified of you going to hell or of them going to hell, and they're being fed these images of people burning in eternity in hell,
Mhm.
that's, you definitely have to set a boundary at that point. You have to draw a line at that point. And we discussed this in the last episode about the fact that when you do that, you have to, one, draw the line and make it extremely clear what that line is. There should be
Mhm.
no beating around the bush or wishy-washy
Mhm.
language. You need to say exactly what you mean. And then once you've set that boundary, you need to follow through with what you say the consequences are going to be, even
Mhm.
if they suck. Like, even if you don't want to have to follow through with them. Like, if
Mhm.
it means that your kids can't be with their grandparents, then that's what it means. You have to follow through with it, because
Mhm.
and the way that I've made people feel better about that decision before is by them understanding that it is the other person's decision. You've given them the option. Like, if you set out the clear boundary, you are then giving them the option. They can either respect you as a parent um, in this situation, or they can totally disregard the fact that you are this child's parent, and they are the ones deciding that that consequence is going to need to be implemented, not you.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
you
that is
chose
such
the
a good way to
consequence.
look at it. Wow. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's still tough though. It's
Yeah.
still tough, and I don't envy people who have had to go through that situation. I'm really lucky in that my difference of opinions with my parents, like, when I talk to them, they hear me and they respect my wishes. Sometimes I have to remind them of things just because they slip up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they totally respect my wishes as a parent, and so, like, I've always had success with that. But I do know how hard that would be to have to, like, cut ties with people or limit time with people. I know how
Right.
hard that would be, but you have to do that for the good of your children. You can't let people abuse them in that way. And it is abuse if you have someone in your life who's making your children fear the flames of hell. That is absolutely 100% abuse. No
Mm-hmm.
question asked.
And when you're setting your boundary with this person or these people, let them know how much they mean to you, how much the relationship means to you, and how devastating you would find it to have to actually um, act on that boundary. And so you respect them, and that's why you're having this conversation, this discussion with them, because you want them to be able to remain a part of your life and your child's life.
Hmm. And as somebody is, they're talking about it in the chat,
Mhm.
that that there's there's no reason why believers and atheists can't get along. And I totally agree that with that. You know that I've put that out there on Twitter multiple times, and that's what my organization is all about. Um, but it's something that people often come to me with. Religious people often come to me with is, oh, because you're out there as Godless Mom, you must hate religious people. And no, I don't hate religious people. I'm just discussing religion from my perspective. And um,
Mhm.
I don't hate religious people. And the way that I usually respond to them is that you can totally disagree with ideas that people have and still love that person. And the best example is me and my mom, right? Like, I disagree with a lot of the ideas that she has, but I see her every day still. She takes care of she picks my son up after school for me. And I love her to death, and she loves me to death, and there's no love lost over that. And there doesn't need to be. Just because she has ideas that I don't like and I have ideas that she doesn't like, it doesn't mean that we need to be at odds. It doesn't mean that I hate her. It doesn't mean that, any of those things. You're allowed to have differing opinions.
Here's where it can get tricky. And so I'm, as someone who has been on both sides of the issue, having been deeply devout and religious, and now being an atheist. If I'm interacting with a religious person, my goal is not to rob them of their faith or anything like that. It really doesn't make a difference to me one way or another. But if someone is absolutely motivated by their fear of hell, and they feel compelled, because in the Bible they're told they have to go and preach the gospel to all the world, that is a totally different thing. I mean, if you're looking at integrity and why you're building friendships, if you're just building a friendship with somebody because you think they need to be saved, that's not cool. There's a lack of integrity there. We need to be transparent. I like you because I like you. I find you to be a good and interesting person. I like spending time with you. So that can be an issue. And that's actually one reason people who leave religion can find it really hard to maintain friendships with people who are still devout. There becomes such a gap between you of what's really important. I mean, if your sole reason, purpose for existing is to try and win the world to Jesus, and me, I'm on the other side. I'm like, I don't care about Jesus. I don't even believe that Jesus was God or anything like that. You run out of things. It becomes a very shallow relationship. So those are issues that people face when they leave religion.
I have this friend who we were really close in high school. She actually, like, man, without her, I don't know where I would have been. She was an awesome friend. She because I lived in Australia for a year when I was 15, and I at the time thought that it was the absolute worst thing that any parent could do to a child, and I was just like determined to be miserable. And this friend of mine wrote to me every day, and it was just everything to me. Like, it saved me that year. Like, I was so, every day I'd go to the mailbox and I'd get a letter from her, and I was so excited to just get word from home. And she meant a lot to me. And then we had kind of a falling out when we became adults, and then we didn't talk for a long time. And she moved to the States, and she became quite religious. And she just recently, like literally a few months ago, she asked me to be her friend on Facebook, and we connected. And so she's this super religious person, and she sees that I'm like the vice president of the International Association of Atheists, right? And I'm like, I'm wondering how is she going to respond to that? Like, how is she going to react to that? And she has been just wonderful. Like, when Mubarak went to prison, and we launched, or we were doing campaign stuff about him being in prison, she was sharing it. She was commenting on it. How can I help? What can I do? Like, she was super supportive, and it hasn't for one moment been about her pushing her religion on me. She has not mentioned it at all to me, not once. She posts about it on her feed, but that's her feed. It's her right. But she's just been super respectful, and I'm super impressed with the way that she's dealt with it. And I'm really glad that it turned out that way, because, like I said, she meant a lot to me in high school. And so it's kind of cool.
I'm so glad. I love hearing stories like that, because you already had a firm friendship established before she became very religious. So there was still some really strong bones there. You know what I mean? To resume the friendship. So
yeah. Interesting things being said in the chat.
We have our moderator working, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Taylor did just say, though, that dinosaurs coexisted with humans.
Well, that's certainly what I always believed. If it's becoming too much of a distraction in the chat, can we maybe just mute her?
Yeah. So we have a producer in the back end. John, do you think that you could find a way to silence the dinosaur thing? Okay, I think she's gone now. Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely the thing is that it's doable to have a relationship with a religious person. You need to have clear boundaries, things that you're not willing to accept. And that's I think the key there. And you have to be willing to stand up for yourself, which that in itself can be really, really difficult for people who have left religion, is standing up for themselves, especially if they're the only atheist in their life and and they have no support to fall back on, and everybody else in the world is religious. It can be really, really difficult to stand up for yourself in that situation.
Can
What
you
would
tell
you
us a little
say?
bit about IAA then? Because that's part of what you do.
Yeah, well, IAA is it's an international organization, obviously, and we support atheists all over the world. As many of us know, in 12 countries in the world, atheism can be punished by death. And in 40 countries in the world, 40 plus countries in the world, it can be punished by prison time, fines, corporal punishment. You can be committed to mental hospitals, just all kinds of stuff. And people have been murdered for it. In Bangladesh, there was a rash of murders of atheist bloggers a few years ago. And so we started our organization with the vision of helping people in those situations. And believe it or not, several of our cases have been in the US. So it's not just the developing world or the Middle East or Africa or anything like that. It's happening everywhere. People are suffering because of religion everywhere. And
What
so
does it look like in the United States, the people that you've helped? So they're not necessarily then in fear for their life, but how would you help
they are
someone in the
they are
States?
they are in fear for their lives. There was
Wow.
one case that we had. She came from a fundamentalist Muslim family,
Mm.
and she told them that at one point that she was an atheist, and they told her that they were going to kill her, because they couldn't it would dishonor their family if it got out.
Mhm.
And they locked her up in her room, and they wouldn't let her leave. But that wasn't too different from her life before that, because in fundamentalist Islam, women don't leave unless they're with a man. They don't drive, they don't get educated, they don't, like, none of those things. So
Mhm.
she had already spent her life indoors, basically by herself, without any education of any kind. And so when she came to us for help, it was after she had fled to another state. And she was in a homeless shelter. We got her a place to live, and we got her like a mentor, because the first thing that we realized is that she, having lived indoors and not been exposed to the real world her whole
Mhm.
entire life, she had absolutely no idea how to do anything. Like, she didn't know how to go grocery shopping. She didn't know how
Wow.
to hail a taxi. She didn't know any of these things. And so we
Mhm.
had to find her a mentor. And so we connected with, in that state, we connected with a humanist group there, and one of their people mentored her. And
Mhm.
um, we had to get her a new cell phone, because they were both connected to her parents, and she was terrified. Um, and the saddest part about it is that we lost contact with her. We helped her, we got her to this place, and we and her mentor lost contact with her, and we assumed she went back, um, because life was just too difficult.
And that's not just for folks who manage to flee Islam, but certainly people. We think of the Bountiful cult in British Columbia, not far from where you and I live. People who are able to, or who get kicked out of Bountiful, which is a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints group, or people who leave Amish backgrounds, closed Mennonite groups, or any number of cults. If they haven't received an adequate education, like oftentimes they're only educated to maybe a grade 6 level or something, they don't know how to use the internet, don't know how to do those basic things you were talking about, open a bank account. When they find themselves on the outside, Many folks spiral into alcohol, drug abuse. Many end up having to sell their bodies because they don't have a way to make a living if they're just completely unsupported. So this is also why I feel the work that you're doing is so important, and also like to direct people to recoveringfromreligion.org. That's another fantastic group if you're looking for help and just want to talk to people as you're navigating leaving your faith and what that looks like. And I see, thank you for putting a little note on there about my workshop. I do the Divorcing Religion workshop. I'm starting another one February 7th. It's a 6-week online program. We meet for 2 hours every Sunday morning, and we go through the workshop, which is 6 modules about divorcing religion. It's very similar to when you lose your spouse or you have a divorce from your spouse. So we look at grieving those losses, and we look at building a new healthy secular life moving forward. So I encourage you, if that's where you're at, if you have divorced religion or you're in the process of doing it, hit me up. We're going to start again on February 7th.
Yeah, I would definitely check that out if you're struggling and you've left religion, which I know a lot of people do when they leave religion. If you're struggling, it's a time investment in your own mental health and your own future. It's definitely life-changing.
And we have people, I have folks who take the workshop who left religion 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and just now they're starting to process their religious trauma and work through that. And the workshop is done in a small group setting on Zoom, so we never have more than 8 people in any one group, and it's a wonderful opportunity to start building your new community that way. So yeah, I really like it. Thanks for the endorsement.
But yeah, so back to the proselytizing to children. I think that it's like we went over, you have to inoculate your kids against this, because you can't something that I get asked constantly is my kids being asked to go to church by my mom or their friend or a neighbor or anything like that, and they want to go check it out. What should I do? And I always say, let them go. If they want to go, if they are curious about it and they want to go, let them go. It's not, if you promote critical thought at home, there's nothing that's gonna get in there and take root if you're really doing the best you can to promote critical thought at home. There are, of course, situations where I would suggest being careful, such as don't leave them at church alone. I wouldn't leave them at church alone. I would even, like, if my son came to me and said he wanted to go to church, I would insist I go with him. So I know what's being said, and I can counter what's being said, or I make sure that he's going with somebody who I completely trust. And the other thing that I would do as well is, after they go to church, I would kind of get a debriefing. I would make sure that afterwards you do the debriefing. You what did they tell you? Did you believe any of it? What are your questions about it? Let's explore this. But as far as just sending them to church goes, the act of letting them go to church itself I don't feel is a risk. There's obviously certain red flags that would change that, but for the most part, I don't feel that that's a risk.
Well, don't we have in middle school in Canada, because my girls did go to middle school in public school, and I think there is a course, I don't know if it's in grade 9 or 10, but all of the students have to go. They take a turn. 1 week they go and they visit a mosque, and then they go and visit a church and a synagogue. Everybody has to do it in order to just kind of see what it's like there. I love that idea. I think that's terrific.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have to do that.
It might be, maybe it's in the cities. I don't know if your town's pretty small. I don't know if you'd have a mosque and a tabernacle and all these different things, but in Kelowna, the kids do that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that well, because I have a stepdaughter too, and I know I talk about all these things with respect to my son because Abby didn't live with us until a couple of years ago. So I wasn't a big part. I was only every second weekend part of her life before that. So I didn't have a big role in raising her up until a few years ago.
And now she
Um,
lives with you.
yes, now she lives with us, and we're very happy about that. But she since she's been with us, she hasn't had to go through that. She graduated, poor thing, graduated in 2020 and missed out on all her grad
Mm.
stuff. But I don't think she had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But that
Mm-hmm.
might be, you might be right, is because it's Summerland, and Summerland is just churches.
And that's not, I mean, just as a parent, you can do that with your kid. If you're living in a big enough center that has all different kinds of houses of worship, there's no reason you can't just take your child and attend those different things to expose them and see, well, this is what it's like here and this is what it's like here. And like you mentioned, Courtney, we need to be doing the work of parenting our kids, of inoculating them, so that if they do get invited out to some kind of assembly, we don't have to be in fear of, oh my God, you know what, they're going to become a robot or whatever it is, because we are going to debrief with them and ask them their thoughts on it and try and do some critical thinking around whatever they heard while they were there.
Yeah, exactly. It's see, the way that I was raised was we didn't talk about religion at all in my house. The only time that it came up is, and I'm sorry if this offends anybody out there, but it was when my dad would make jokes about
Mm.
the Pope mostly, but like he had lots of jokes about religion, and he had no time for religion. He felt it was only good for comic relief. And again, I apologize if this is offending you. Um, but that's how he felt about it. And that's how I was raised. I wasn't like, my dad never sat down with me and said, these are the different beliefs. But at the same time, nobody else was trying to put that information in my mind either.
Okay.
Like I wasn't being there were no religious people around me. I had my best friend when I was in grade 2 was from a Buddhist family.
Hmm.
And that was it.
Mhm.
Like I didn't know what church was. I didn't know what God was. I didn't know
No.
what Jesus was. I remember going to my cousin's baptism and being completely horrified. I was like, what in the loving hell are we doing? Like, what is going on here? Like,
Oh, good times. Every ideology must be open to examination. This is, the idea that someone's religion is off limits for poking fun at or drawing cartoons of or anything like that is total hogwash. Every ideology must be able to stand on its own. I'm not going to respect it because you insist that I respect it. No.
yeah.
I will show you respect. I hope that I'm always respectful to people that I'm having discussions with and communication with. But we do not have to respect or obey anybody's ideology.
No, I have a lot of people who I've connected with online who are religious and who I get along with fantastically. They understand that I like when I share a funny meme about Jesus, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. It's just that this is my perspective. This is how I see things, right?
Mhm.
This is where I'm coming from. And I think that something that people, even a lot of atheists, forget is that atheists have every right to have an opinion on your religion. You're not the only one who gets to have an opinion on your religion. We are allowed to have an opinion on your religion. And at the same time, we are also allowed to talk about it when we want to. um,
Mhm.
and if it's bothering you, you go somewhere else. But we are entitled to be able to have those conversations out there. If you can go out in public and talk about your opinion on your religion, then we can go out in public and talk about our opinion on your religion as well. And that's just something that you have to cope with. But John just told me that he has a relevant question. So
all right.
what is the question, John? Do y'all think rural kids are more pressured about religion? I'm thinking small towns with homogenous religions or maybe two dominant ones. Well, I am in a small town, but we were actually just talking about this before the podcast about how my town is a little bit different. It's a little bit different than most small towns, like the way you picture them, because I think the reason why is because there's a lot of transplants from bigger urban centers here. So we don't have a lot of religious people, and it is definitely a rural town. I can looking at a vineyard right now. But it is my son has not had any pressure about religion at all living here, and we've been here for almost 7 years now. So I don't feel that, but I know you also have experience with a small town, right, Janice?
I do. My ex-husband, he pastored in a small prairie town in Saskatchewan, very small, like less than 1,000 people. And I really felt for the young people in that town, because either you were a jock or you joined Air Cadets. That was it. That's what was available in that town, like hockey or Air Cadets. Otherwise, there wasn't really much else. And so, of course, when we moved there into the Pentecostal church, we tried as hard as we could to make it engaging and interesting for the young people, and, starting up a youth group and all that kind of stuff. I think out of sheer boredom, young people might attend. And then also, there aren't all those after school programs in a lot of the small towns. So that's one thing we also did to try and proselytize and win kids for Jesus, was we did kids club at least once a week. So yeah, there can be that pressure just because they don't have as many choices for ways to spend their time. That's an interesting question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think moving, because we lived in Vancouver, in several different suburbs around Vancouver.
Stop bragging.
And we lived in like the downtown core of Surrey as well. That is not bragging.
No, that is not the bragging.
We lived right in Wally.
No,
but gosh. It was, to be fair, it was right when they were doing the rejuvenation projects in the middle of Wally and we lived in one of those nice condo buildings, but it was still a super sketchy area, but they had great Asian food, which I miss so much.
Yes, seriously.
And then we moved here, and it was funny because we came here on a trip before we decided to move here. It was actually a trip I won, which is weird. And we came to Kelowna, and it was in the middle of winter. And I had always, growing up, I'd come to the Okanagan constantly for camping trips and lake trips and cabins on the lake and all this stuff with my family. And I had never seen the Okanagan in the winter. And when I got here in January and I was in Kelowna, and we were outside walking around Kelowna, like on the lakefront in winter. You don't do that in Vancouver because it's wet and gross, right? Like it gets into your bones and you just, like, it is colder in Vancouver when it's 2 and raining than when it's -10 and sunny in Kelowna. And I just fell in love. And there was like a dusting of snow on the hills everywhere, and it was bright and sunny, and we were walking around, the waterfront where the ice rink is right on the lake. Oh, that was it for me. I was like, John, we got to move here. And so I do not, like, since we've been here, I've been restless in every single place I've lived. I've lived in a lot of places, including other countries. restless, didn't want to stay, didn't feel like it was home until I got here. I do not regret moving to this small town. I love it.
Yay!
Yeah. It's not very backwardsy small town though here. It's
Yeah, I feel there's a difference. I think, like having lived on the prairies, some of those small towns can be somewhat backwards. Certainly not all. And wherever you are, you're going to make it what you're going to make it into being. You can purpose in your heart that you're going to try and enjoy it or change it or whatever it is, or you can be like, I'm done. Time to move on.
yes. See, that's something that I was indoctrinated with, because my
Hmm.
parents, as you all probably know, as I talk about it constantly, is my parents took me traveling all over the world my whole life. And I was indoctrinated with the idea that like beaches and tropical locations were everything, and that's what you strive for in life, is to be there. And when I actually went and lived in the Mayan Riviera for 2 years, and it was great. I had my son there, and it was a wonderful experience, but it was not someplace I could stay. And I got tired of the heat. I love seasons. And it took me a while to realize that no, my parents are wrong. It's not where you are. It's who you're with. It's your attitude about it. And you can make any place that you live within reason. There's some places that are just like not conducive to happiness at all. But for the most part in our world, wherever you live, you make it what it is. You make it a home. It's your attitude about it that makes it a home, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the great joys of being free. We get to decide what our life is going to look like and what we want to pursue and the type of person we want to be, what's important to us. And that's very nice, not to have somebody else telling you how you have to be. You get to decide how you want to be.
Yeah. So when you left your religion, what things about your parenting changed?
Well, I went from being a very kind of hands-on, in-your-face parent who was constantly trying to orchestrate, like keeping the world at bay, making sure that worldly influences were not going to impact my children. And it took me a few years to really completely kind of deconstruct or deconvert, however you want to call it. But then I became a very hands-off parent. I think it was a shock. My kids probably got whiplash from seeing that happen. So I became much more about letting the kids explore and try new things and reach their own conclusions, because I was doing that also. It wasn't like a graceful process for me. It was pretty much a gong show, having gone from being wound so tightly to them being completely free. And my kids had a front row seat to that gong show, and they didn't ask for it. I'm sure it was amusing at times, but probably frightening at times to see a parent change that much, and when they've brought you up to have such firm beliefs and suddenly they don't hold those beliefs anymore, that could be tricky. That actually would be a great topic another time for us to talk about too. And I did ask my kids at one point, when they were, I think by the time they were in their later teens, what they thought about it all, about my deconversion and how it affected them. And they both said that I certainly became a lot easier once religion was removed. So, and I mean, I think that's true.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So are your kids then, do they consider themselves atheists?
I think probably agnostic. Yeah, agnostic, atheist, maybe. I find they're not overly interested in labels, but certainly the four of us, so my two daughters, and they're grown now, and their dad, who I'm not married to anymore, we're still quite a tight unit. We talk regularly in our family chat online. And we will bring up memories. Oh, remember when this was like so important to us? Or remember when I wouldn't let you do that thing, and then now I'm doing that thing? And we can laugh about it, but there were painful times that we walked through as well. And I'm just so fortunate that we all live nearby and stay connected.
Yeah, I think another reason why we don't have to worry about our kids too much is because of just the time that we're in, right? Like, I have found that our kids are just not interested in whether or not they're an atheist or a Christian. They don't care. There's some exceptions, obviously, but for the most part, I think that today's kids are just removed from that. It's just not even a thing anymore. And I'm talking about here in Canada,
Right.
because I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world. But I think that it's just it's a non-thing here. And I think as long as you just don't make it a big deal, your kids are going to be fine. They're going to turn out fine. And I think another reason is because of the internet and the just the way that you can instantly reach out to any part of the world. You can learn about other cultures at the snap of a finger. You can connect with people from all different religions and all different belief systems on the internet, and you're also exposed to just the entirety of human knowledge at your fingertips. And I think that that's something that is helping this generation, and future is going to help future generations be better critical thinkers, because they have access to way more information than we ever did.
And at the same time, it's true that unfortunately, certainly even in Canada, a portion of our young people do get radicalized. We have had them run away and join ISIS and just or even just become extreme about different views. I'm thinking of incels and things that end up being quite dangerous, and we can potentially help inoculate against that too, if we are, from the time that the kids are young or whatever, we're able to be developing critical thinking skills, and also helping them navigate and cope with some really uncomfortable emotions that can come along with adolescence and being a teen, or feeling left out, feeling disconnected, because a lot of times those are exactly the kids and young people who get sucked into extremist groups. So we do need to be paying some kind of attention and just working towards fostering healthy relationships with our own kids, where they know they can talk to us about anything and ask us questions about anything, and we're not going to laugh at them or shut them down. They're allowed to ask.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is, kids don't go searching for a support system somewhere else if they have a good one at home. And that's kind of how I look at it. That's, of course, a lot easier said than done, because
Mm-hmm.
teenagers get tricky.
Yeah. Some
You don't
kids from very, very good homes end up falling in with very, very damaging crowds, and that can be heartbreaking all around.
Yeah, exactly. Teenagers are tricky. It's easy to lose your grip on that. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but we have been at this for an hour, so I
Yeah.
think we should try to wrap this up. And I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. And Neil, I'll talk to you after about you can teach me the ropes, all this stuff, because I'm starting figuring it out. And we will be back next week again with another topic. If you want your question to be discussed on air at length, then you can go in the description. There's information in there on how you can submit your question for us to discuss. And just keep in mind that our advice, although Janice is a certified counselor, our advice should not replace you seeking the help of a professional out like for your specific situation. Janice is a professional, but she doesn't know your specific situation. So
That's right. Oh, thanks everyone for joining in and chiming in. It's been interesting trying to follow some of your conversations going on there. Please do send us your requests or ideas for discussion.
yep. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.